You did. Yeah.
Okay, welcome back to Senate Economic Development, Housing and General Affairs. We are going to shift back to housing, and I would ask, we are going to welcome Sean Straffen. And Sean, I'm Allison Plexer. I think we should introduce ourselves because if you haven't been in this committee before, you know Keisha, but yeah. And after we introduce ourselves, I'm going to ask Keisha to tee up why we're here and why we invited you. So
very good.
Sean, I don't think we met before. My name is Tom Chittenden. I represent Chittenden Southeast, the same district as Senator Ron Hinsdale.
Keisha, you know, Parks and Windsor District.
Randy Brock, Franklin and Northern Grand Isle.
Good morning, Sean. Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
Great. And Keisha, just be kind enough to introduce them to why we're here.
Sure. So you know, I'm very grateful we met in 2014 around some other policy matters that were before the legislature, but we've stayed in touch since that time because it's really it's been really insightful for me to know how development is or is not happening in the Northeast Kingdom. You know, when there are champions and people who are seeking to access capital and get rural scale projects built as well. So I'm glad that Sean still considers me a thought partner on that front and reached out when he was trying to build home ownership, manufactured housing opportunities in Orleans. By the way, my mother-in-law's family is from Orleans. They're Crotos, so she grew up in the big across from the old Ethan Allen factory. So definitely an area that needs economic development and good, efficient housing opportunities for people. And Sean's project, unfortunately, as he will tell you, was essentially rendered financially non-viable by pushback from the community. And he shared with me an email where the lawyer in the Act 50 case that would represent the opposition to him was already named. And that's a very chilling thing we hear about a lot, that, you know, we get the name and the pedigree of the person who will be fighting you in court to stop your project or de-densify your project. And that was exactly what happened in this case. I will say, to be fair, David Snedeker reached out to me, who's Northeast Kingdom economic development planning. And he said he wants to help you find other projects and other opportunities. But I still think this is really instructive as to the why. I want us to all have a very clear why when we look at some bold housing language in the coming week. And this hopefully helps remind people of the why, because we have to be bold.
Right. So Sean, it is yours. Introduce yourself and illustrate the challenge that Keisha just identified that you have sadly experienced.
Sure, so I'll kind of start back a little while ago. So my name's Sean Straffen. I'm owner of New Kingdom Properties, LLC. We're based in Lyndonville, Vermont. It was the flood. The company started around the flood of 2023. So I have about 22 years of construction and project management experience. And we had an older manufactured housing rental. That rental was absolutely decimated in the flood of 2023. And because it was technically a small business, FEMA would not help us. It was not our primary residence. So we had to engage the Small Business Administration. And that was just incredibly long and daunting and frustrating. So in the meantime, I was writing everybody that I could think of. And I ended up in Becca Balin's office. And a nice gal, Morgan Nichols, did everything she could to help us to move that forward. And so in that process, we learned about the Vermont Housing Improvement Program. That program is a wonderful program. So we were able to work with them and sort of skip the small business administration portion of that, get the grant moving forward to help us install the property. We were trying to not have our current tenants be displaced. The 9-month lead time for small business administration and even the VHIP program forced that tenant to be relocated. But anyway, so we were looking for the best possible solution, and we found Skyline Homes. They're manufactured. They were once based in Fairhaven, Vermont. They're a manufactured housing, outfit, and they do 2x6 construction, New England package, Energy Star rated, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,000 square feet, brand new. You never know that you're in a what people imagine when they think of mobile or manufactured housing. So we sort of started working with a dealer, and that we found that it was very difficult to do business with this one individual. So we decided, given our experience, to pursue the ability to be a contract dealer ourselves. So we did end up getting the home through that dealer finally. But in the meantime, we ended up pursuing our housing and urban development certification on our own. And so now, as we sit right now, we're federally certified by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to not only sell, but install and inspect all manufactured housing. So I back up. So we ended up installing the house. We got the VHIP grant through there, and we started to we did the 5-year option for that program, and that was through coordinated entry. So they give you the opportunity to screen these people and look for. We found this one gal who was a teacher, and she had 2 teenage daughters, and when we brought her and showed her opportunity where she would be living, she was just absolutely grateful to a degree that my partner Rachel and I were really thrilled with. And so,
Can I just for a second? I thought this was a multi-family project that you were working on. It was a one-family home?
So this it is a series of one-family homes. I was kind of giving you how we got to the Orleans thing.
It was several one-family homes.
If I could just say, yeah, which in a lot of rural contexts, it's just a cluster of single manufactured homes is greatly preferable, right? People want their own 4 walls, and it doesn't necessarily fit into an apartment building there.
Yeah.
The project would have called on the very low density threshold in Orleans of 1 unit per acre, which is quite a different cost.
And you had this property where there were up to could have done 20 units per acre, right?
Well, so we're
actually don't get ahead. Don't get ahead. You just keep going. I'm sorry.
Okay, great. So
you started with a teacher who was very excited about your Skyline.
Yeah, and at that point, we decided we were going to do this again. So it's through the VHIP program, we've created. We have applications for 5 units. We've created a total of 3. We have 2 more coming. We've decided that because every one that we've put into these units, a lot of them have never had anything new. They've never had a new car, certainly not a new house. They've just been absolutely grateful to a degree that is incredibly rewarding for us. We've decided that this is what we are going to commit to for the balance of our lives. So speaking with the VHIP program, they really liked what we had been doing, and so they said, well, could you find some more property? So we started looking for more property. We started looking for specific properties that had municipal infrastructure, water and sewer, and there was slim pickings. So a lot of them were very wetlands or on hills. We would have had to crane up the manufactured homes. There just really wasn't anything that fit our needs versus the cost. And so a realtor friend of mine who was helping me with this project, he said, well, there's 20 acres in Orleans that has municipal water and sewer, and it's basically a hayfield. And so that sounded great to us. So we pulled the listing, and I realized that it was NVDA who actually owned the property. So Mr. Snedeker and I have a working relationship. I won't get into that, but he's been a tenant individual in my life through a few things, a great many things actually that I've done. So I reached out to him. I said, David, this is more than we were initially looking for, but the price point is really good, and basically here's the conceptual plan. So when I was underhoused at one time in my life, so I started in a manufactured home. I had my own half an acre. I purchased it. I was able to mow my own lawn, pay my own taxes, and my life really started from there. So my idea was to create quarter-acre lots where these individuals have a brand new Energy Star rated, highly efficient, 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom. Even with the infrastructure costs, this is all very broad strokes. We had engineers on site to look at, and some other conversations. We found that we could probably do this project for under $150,000 per unit.
Wow.
And so us being a dealer, we could put our dealer cost in that. HUD certified. We can do we have a sister company that does our dirt work. We lay the foundations. We're certified all the way up to do absolutely everything except for, of course, the final electrical connections and the connections to water and sewer, which is trades. You have to have the licensed plumber and the licensed electrician to do that. So when this sort of progressed, the town heard about it very, very quickly. And so then there was a petition started before we'd even had an opportunity to speak to the board, the zoning board. And so we thought that first we would have a open forum town hall meeting where I could talk to everybody and tell them what was going on. Well, so about 70 people showed up in opposition. I think in the end, about 50 left in opposition. There was a time where people were, speaking on our behalf and sort of, defending the cause. In the end, our proposal was 51 units on 20.8 acres. That would have kept the costs. The infrastructure cost was about $3 million. So all of those units would have kept the cost down to about between $145,000 and $150,000 a unit. Fully installed driveways, slabs. I'm sorry?
Amazing, given the numbers we've heard for obviously almost everything else. Sean, just remind me, this was a former industrial park?
Yeah, so that was kind of the one of the crooks. So the land specifically has never been developed clearly, and was in industrial zoning in one form or another for the last 40 years. So the at one time, about 10 years ago, the town of Barton thought, well, this would be great also if we can attract business for a housing community. And it's actually permitted. So not a conditional use, but permitted for a mobile home park and manufactured housing. So that being the case, we went into it thinking that there was not going to be an issue. Well, so the town said this is for jobs and this is for businesses. The feedback that we got was that there really isn't enough people to even supply the businesses that exist there, Ethan Allen being one of them. The petition was great. We're really grateful there was a petition because it cited all of the concerns of the town, which really gave us a hit list essentially to go and speak to the supervisory union, the principals of the schools, the local businesses, and all of the things that were concerning these people. We have quotes from the schools that say that they have the capacity, that this would be wonderful for them. And there, of course, everybody was looking for workforce, and this would supply the workforce housing. So we went into it thinking that this was a great fit, a little bit more than we were initially looking for, but was absolutely surmountable. So when we went into, we got immediately interrupted when we were giving our presentation to the town. And one of the concerns was, well, it's still very hilly. You can't put manufactured homes on there. Well, I said, well, if we were going to build a business there, in the use of the industrial park, well, the things are going to have to be leveled and filled and everything anyway. And if you were to fill it with business, then there would be likely more, people and traffic and everything, and all these things that you're telling me are the problems with this development. What it boiled down to is they hired Downs, Racklin, and Martin to fight the land use Act 250 portion, and it was an unmetered cost. So we had all of this. We were talking to all of our funders. We had everything almost together. It was down to about only 10% imaginary, and then there was the legal portion, and I just could not justify getting into that, and I had no idea what that was going to cost. Then, aside from that, I received an email from David Snedeker, and he said that there was no way the town was going to let 51 units, that because of the current bylaws as they sit right now, it is 1 unit per acre in an industrial zone. So that brought it down to about $5 million of cost from $8 million, but still for 20 houses, that brought us up to like $266,000 per finished unit, and there was just no way that we could make that affordable and achieve our goal. So, all things being equal, we had to rescind our offer, and we're doing our best to move on.
Oh, that's a tough tale. Remind me because I'm remembering from your email. Remind us the 20 acres that you were proposing to do these 50 units on. What percent of the industrial park was that? Was that the entire park, or was that just a percent of the park?
Well, so there's actually 3 businesses in the industrial park. One is an animal shelter. So Vermont Beef Jerky and Kim Tech. They, I believe the park was originally about 40 acres, so I believe that it represents about half what was allocated for industrial use.
Great. And if you'd be kind of it had water and sewer, how close to the village center was it?
Yeah. So about 15% of the property was on that map of the Village Development Center. So you go to A&R, the PNR, and on the state, you have that development center map in red, and about 15% of that property was in that development center. So Act 250 probably would have been a portion of it. I was actually that's what made me reach out to Keisha in the first place. She's been a proponent of Act 250's exemptions when it comes to housing development as a whole.
And we couldn't make any of the current exemptions for this interim period work for you on that because.
Yeah, well, so we actually didn't get to that point on this when it came to the actual legal battle and the housing cap. So there were 2 things that we were fighting right there that were going to take an incredible amount of bandwidth. My strategy was to pull back, report our takeaways, and then see where we can go from here.
Right, thank you. Tom?
In your travels on this, and I'm sorry if you did speak to this, was there a resource argument for the 1 house per acre related to how much sewage and stormwater it would produce? Or
Well,
is,
so even not necessarily. So in the petition, they cited the stormwater runoff. Of course, our plan included catch basins and what have you. The stormwater runoff, they wanted to bring in the people who defend Lake Memphremagog, and it's really it's upstream from the dump, so that was a portion. I never really got close enough to figure out exactly how they were going to fight us on the Act 250 portion, but in the petition, the stormwater runoff was a portion. As far as the sewage, the moment that you crested that hill on the top where the infrastructure ended, you'd be into a pump station on the bottom. As it happens, the abutters who were residential abutters have been lobbying for the municipal sewer, and we said if we're going to bring it down there, have at it. I mean, we would love to help you, and so in our costs, we ended up working with Northern Borders, and they were eager to give us a grant to help offset the infrastructure. The municipality would have had to apply for that, and based on all of the pushback they were getting, that was one of the risks. Is there was no guarantee that they would actually apply for that Northern Borders grant.
but just to button that up, you had every reason to believe you could have engineered sewage capacity to meet the density that you were contemplating.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and even extend it to
Oh yeah,
neighbors.
yeah. We were trying to make this a good thing.
Yeah, no, and a win-win for everybody. No, that's very
That's
clear issue.
Well, just to add to that point, and to kind of underscore what Sean is saying, when something is already zoned for industrial or commercial use, you can't take that back from people in a process like this. You just prohibit housing from being built. So this happened on Route 7 near me, where a bowling alley was going to become housing, and the neighbors fought it, and it became a car wash.
Yeah.
And they were still up in arms, and it was still, had environmental impact, but they weren't able to. You can't change the use in that process. You can't have your cake and eat it too. So you end up with more commercial uses that frankly cost us more in climate emissions because people can't live near where they work.
Well,
So this is an anti-environmental provision that we do not allow more housing to be developed on former commercial and industrial sites. I asked Cameron to add this particular piece to the bill because we did have a piece that said if there's up to 25 units in a former industrial site, it's exempt from the permit amendment process in Act 250. But we should ensure that you can get your 5 units per acre that we have elsewhere in the law on a former industrial site as well.
but to go back to our previous work, our municipal zoning work meant that you could no longer do the 1 house per acre. And so how did that play with this? Because that's already gone into effect.
But that was when you are along water and sewer, which I have language on as well. And I asked David Snedeker this also.
Right. So I'm puzzled by that. That
yes.
shouldn't have been able to be used.
Yes, so there's this, the biggest problem Sean is talking about is naming a high-powered lawyer and saying, we're gonna make this difficult for you unless you do 1 unit per acre. That is what we have to stop. And I have more pieces of legislation I'll present tomorrow to do that, because this is the chilling effect. I saw the email where they named the very high-powered lawyer who was going to oppose this project, and that just should not happen.
Right. Because that is my primary takeaway here, is that the minute you are confronted with legal costs that you can't match,
Right.
it's really David and Goliath.
I don't know this lawyer. He's probably very talented and high powered, but I shouldn't even say they name a high powered lawyer. They just say the words Act 250 and it stops these projects in their tracks.
So, and I guess I've also, given it was so close to an area that I thought would have been exempted in our interim measures, that's what I don't understand and would need some clarity on from.
Sure. So we immediately did our PNR, which is basically your permit list of permits that you're going to do. Act 50 came up because the property was not completely in the development center. So we contacted immediately Kirsten Sultan, who is our D7 Act 250 administrator, and she said, yeah, because it was less than 25%, then it was going to be under the Act 250. We were going to have to go through all of that. So in our costs, we put in, we put in all the permit costs. We had all of that covered. It was just, the unmetered cost of a legal fight, not only maybe with the town.
Yeah,
but
I love that term you used, unmetered. Thomas, you have a.
So I get that this ship has sailed and you have let this project go, but imagining in a world where we make some changes to the legislature this session, do you see this as still being a possibility down the road if we do take some corrective action here in the State House?
For this particular piece of property, I would say absolutely. I did not want to let it go, but however, there was too much. I mean, how do you go back to Vermont Community Loan Fund, and how do you go back to Evernorth, and how do you have that conversation with the Vermont Housing Improvement Program and VHFA and CGI and everyone, and just say, I'm not sure what's going on here. They're going to fight us. Hold on a moment, so as my goal with this proceeding, and I'm really thankful to be invited, was if it does go through, that's wonderful. We get to help those 50 families. But if we don't get to help those 50 families, then maybe we can pull back and figure out how to push a path forward to maybe help 100. So that's where we're at right now. I'm personally available to help you guys with any sort of manufactured housing questions or determinations, or to get the costs absolutely down as far as we possibly can. Skyline delivers everywhere in Vermont, and myself and my crew are at your disposal.
So just one final question, then Randy had the question. The 15% that was in the village boundary, how many houses could you have built on that 15%?
Yeah, unfortunately, that was undeveloped. Right now. Yeah. So there was that was not on the desirable portion of the property. Right now, there was in that 15% was still all trees and undeveloped and not unlevel. So really, what could we have put in there if we really wanted to? Probably about 10. But the real sweet piece of the property was on the other side from that that was in.
Okay, thanks. I just finish that part of the question, Randy.
I just like to have some clarity as to what the intent is. Is the fix to provide clarity so at this point in time where there are no further appeals once certain parts of the process are passed?
That is another proposal that I already have in the works, and that proposal would essentially say, when you have your A&R permit and your municipal permit, someone can appeal an Act 250, but the project can start to be built at that point. They cannot delay your project.
But essentially, you're obviously taking the risk that if you lose the appeal, what you've done during that process.
So that Massachusetts has something around this that I'm asking people to look into, because they've given the financial institution some security that because you have that round of permits, the project will move forward, and you might be asked to do some minor remediation or some new transportation piece.
There's still some degree of risk. What I'm just interested in making sure that we don't do is that we don't remove the ability of legitimate appeals to be
Right.
filed.
Right.
So that we provide sufficient clarity as to when the time and under what circumstances the right to appeal is ended, so that everybody knows what that is.
Yeah, and frankly, once you get your municipal permit, it's probably gone through your town plan, your community process, et cetera. But we can keep working on the language. I needed to find a point in time where,
Okay.
But
as people
Well,
argue, we
which is-
used to not have we used to have Act 250 and not all these other permits. Now these other permits are appealable. They all kind of take
Yeah,
care of
yeah.
it.
Got it.
so I'll just remind us also that we have an appeal review and reform work being done by LURB. And I'm hoping in this committee, part of our housing bill will be to ask to advance and to that due date to November
Yeah.
1st, so that we can have it, so that we can actually
I mean,
make
all
action.
of
No,
the
we don't
clarity
understand.
is what is essential, so
Yeah.
that everybody knows what the rules are.
Right.
The rules are sufficiently clear.
Right.
Sean, thank you. I know you're available for continued work. I think we're all really heartbroken to hear that this project at the moment maybe just at the moment is
Just to
taking
close-
a pause.
If I could offer a closing comment on this testimony, thank you. This is, if I can use the term poster child for why I stepped into the political arena 10 years ago. And I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here, but why I decided to put myself out there and run for South Burlington City Council and even come here to the legislatures. We just made it too damn hard to build a house in this state. And we need to address it. So thank you for giving this very, very
Yeah.
useful testimony. And I hope we can get that project started in the years to come.
Yeah, here.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you so much, Sean.
Thank you guys so
More to
much.
follow. More to follow. Thank you. So,
Are you going to be the rent is too damn high?
Yeah.
guy?
Yeah, that's
too damn
Thank
hard.
you.
I was gonna say,
Leave the floor.
Can I say damn on the floor?
I don't know. I'm
I
getting
think you could
permission. They can bleep it out.
so we're now gonna pivot to the program Sean lauded at the beginning, which is VHIP and ADUs, because they are a key piece of the administration's proposal on housing. And so we're going to have Sean and Jamie Bauer. Sean Gilpin, who is until he joins us, I assume he is waiting for us.
Getting online, right?
Great. And there's Paul, but we're not hearing from Paul until after we hear from Sean and Jamie. Hi, Paul.
How you doing?
We're well, thank you. We look forward to hearing from you, but are Sean and okay, there's Sean and Jamie, who we haven't met. So, Sean, we are going to pivot to VHIP and ADUs, our housing partners for a lot of the low-hanging fruit. We're very proud of this program. You haven't maybe met our two new members, so let's just quickly go around for you and Jamie, who I haven't met, and Paul, all three of you. Let's introduce ourselves, and then we're going to turn it over to Sean.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Chittenden. I represent the southeast quadrant of Chittenden County.
Senator Keisha Rumsfeld, same district.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
Randy Brock, Franklin County and Northern Grand Isle.
Good morning, Dave Weeks, Rutland County.
Great. Thank you, Sean, our VHIP master. I think you're the director. What is your actual, you're the division director of DHCD. So welcome and introduce yourselves. And we're looking forward to an update and to reviewing your ask this year.
Can I just say one thing, Sean, before you start? 2 weeks ago, I emailed Arthur Hamlin,
Who
not
left as of
realizing
Jan-
he retired a week before. So, I mean, that's such a tremendous sea change and loss for people who may not know. I mean, he helped get us through mobile home changes after Tropical Storm Irene. He kind of wrote the book on supporting manufactured housing communities and low-income Vermonters, and it's just it's a huge hole that has been left. But I know, Sean, you worked with him closely as his understudy at that time as well.
So, and in fact, we need to find out who can speak to him, speak to mobile home lot increases, because we have a bill that we're going to be looking at in our housing bill. So in fact, Heidi's been in touch, I know, with you to find out who, now that Arthur's retired, and maybe we ask Arthur to come and testify. Anyway, it's yours.
Fair enough. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sean Gilpin, and yes, I've moved on up. I'm the director of the housing division. I've been there for about a little over 11 years now. Crazy to say, and it's gone from pretty small group of folks, just me and the aforementioned Arthur and Senator Rom Hinsdale. I thought you said it was going to be. It was a. Thought you were going to say it was a traumatic sea change, but which could be as opposed to a tremendous one, but it could
It was
be.
traumatic to just see the email bounce back and not have known, but he retired.
So
Yes,
that's
I would love to.
Arthur, a huge debt.
Absolutely. Arthur Hamlin worked with our department for a little over 28 years and was at the CVOEO mobile home program before that. So it is actually not an exaggeration to say that Arthur has been working with mobile home parks in Vermont for as long as I have walked. With that, yeah, I do want to give a sign off to Arthur and a hope that he is having a wonderful time in retirement. I would suggest trying to grab him before his wife Darcy retires from the Department of Labor later this year, and they get in their RV and drive off into the sunset. So
Before, just to put a pin on that, if you'd be kind enough to share with Heidi how we reach Arthur, that would be key.
certainly, I will do that. And just also to wrap that, we have hired a replacement for Arthur. Scott Charland has been with our team for a couple years now, overseeing the manufactured housing improvement and repair program. So he's been cutting his teeth along with Arthur, alongside Arthur on mobile home issues. So as far as this legislative session, I think Scott and I will probably tag team as he's getting his sea legs under him, so to speak. So with that, though, I'll pivot to VHIP, which, yes, is a program that I know that our department is incredibly proud of. It's, I think, by all measures, continues to be a huge success. I'd like to give a little quick refresher, or perhaps a primer for the new folks on the committee about what VHIP is, sort of its history, because it's been a pretty dynamic program over the last 5 years, especially. And then I'll hand it over to my colleague, Jamie, who can introduce herself in a minute to talk about some of the statistics and where we're at right now, and then wrap up with sort of next steps with the governor's ask and what we hope to see the future of VHIP. So if that works for the committee, I'll jump right in. So
I think we just love an update on where we are, how many, and then we're going to speak to Paul about some of how the ADUs are rolling out, how we might be able to help on that.
Certainly. So the Vermont Housing Improvement Program we like to consider it a rapid unit creation program. The concept is to provide relatively small grants and now forgivable loans to private property owners who are in possession of properties that are underutilized. So either they don't make code, perhaps it's a unutilized commercial space that would be better suited for a residential. And we allow for a few other instances that I'll talk about in a moment. But the idea is really to jumpstart, sort of to catalyze some rehabilitation of existing structures primarily, so that we can quickly get units online, modest units online, to address the availability issue. Because we know that I don't need to reiterate to this committee, we've been dealing with an affordability and availability crisis for a number of years in Vermont, and this is one piece, and I will reiterate that a couple times. I don't by any stretch want to suggest that this is the solution. It is a piece or is a tool in the toolbox, a piece in the puzzle, pick your metaphor, but it's an important one and an impressive one. So the concept actually was born a number of years ago because of the problem that was being addressed was the fact that we were a number of years back starting to see Section 8 housing choice vouchers actually be sent back to the federal government because people who were eligible and had them in hand were not able to find a unit that met the housing quality standards, which are HUD mandated housing quality standards that align, I would say, 85 to 90% with Vermont Housing Health Code. But they do have some elements that are a little bit more stringent than Vermont Housing Health Code. So you can imagine that there could be a unit available that met all of the health codes for Vermont, but not necessarily quite for HUD. And if a landlord had a line out the door of people seeking that unit, they could easily say that they were not willing to, do the housing quality standards, and rather would rent to somebody else who was willing to take the unit as is, which was obviously causing some issues with us finding available units for people that had a rental subsidy. And so the idea was to provide these grants to property owners to bring units up to code, up to those housing quality standards in a rapid fashion. And so while we now talk about VHIP as a program that's been running for about 5 years now, it really has been really 3 or 4 different programs, slightly different programs that we've sort of run in consecutively. So we had pitched the idea years ago for various different reasons. The proposal didn't get legs, and most recently, before the pandemic, it was actually included in a larger bill that had a rental registry and various other things that ultimately was vetoed. And unfortunately, VHIP's structure was put aside along with the rest of that bill at that time. When the coronavirus hit and we were in rapid response mode, trying to evacuate the congregate shelter situations and find places for people to live in a healthy manner, we opted to use coronavirus relief funds. So folks might remember that was at the very end of the first Trump administration, and were pre-ARPA, pre-American Rescue Plan Act funding. And so the department opted to utilize some of the CRF funding to implement VHIP as it had been designed in that vetoed bill, by and large. So in September of 2020, we engaged with the 5 home ownership centers around the state. I'm happy to reiterate which ones those are if the committee would like, but collectively they cover every region of the state, every town in the state. And they have expertise with doing, and you'll hear from Paul shortly, with doing rehab, construction, that sort of thing. And so they were our boots on the ground. So we partnered with the 5 home ownership centers to actually do the on-the-ground outreach to identify eligible property owners to receive applications to review projects.
Sean, if you would just remind particularly the new members who our 5 partners are, because I certainly am aware of anyway, if you just be kind enough to rename them.
Sure, certainly. So we have Champlain Housing Trust covers the northwest corner. Rural Edge is our operator in the Northeast Kingdom. Wyndham Windsor Housing Trust is the most easily named of them, covering Wyndham and Windsor. Downstreet Housing is sort of the center of the state, and then NeighborWorks of Western Vermont covers our west coast, so to speak. So Rutland's down through Bennington.
And is
Addison down through Bennington.
I know they've merged.
Yes, NeighborWorks of Western Vermont, and Jamie's actually been working on that a little bit because we've had to change a bunch of our forms and the like. Every little tweak is a big change. But they actually merged with the Housing Trust of Rutland County. So they didn't expand their jurisdiction, they just consolidated some of the similarly operating organizations in the same region.
Right.
So those are
our partners.
Those are our 5: NeighborWorks, Wyndham Windsor, Downstreet, Rural Edge, and Champlain Housing Trust.
Right.
And those are essential partners for identifying these projects and for actually doing the inspections, carrying them out, doing reimbursements to contractors, reimbursements to property owners and the like. So they are the front line, and we oversee the distribution of funds to those home ownership centers to do that, and then collect the information about the project.
Right.
So in September of 2020, we launched sort of the first iteration, and it was actually called the Rehousing Recovery Program. And it was a mad dash. It was nothing short of an insane moonshot. The CRF funds were originally supposed to be spent by the end of calendar year 2020. So if you can imagine trying to rehabilitate units between September and December, we took the leap and we got an awful lot done. At the very last minute, actually after the very last minute, I think it was after the funds were supposed to be spent, Congress in Washington opted to extend those, the eligible timeline for the usage of those funds. So we were able to continue to complete projects. When and at that time, the program was up to a $30,000 grant per unit for rehabilitation, bringing units up to code. So I want to be clear that this is very much a modest program to do. I won't say minimal, but again, modest improvements to a unit in order to address code violations. This is not major renovations to upgrading a unit that is otherwise viable. It's not luxury finishes. It's not those sort of things. It's very much trying to bring underutilized units back in order. So again, it began as up to a $30,000 grant. And in exchange, the grantee, the property owner, had to rent that unit for at least 5 years at the HUD, what's called the fair market rent, which is a bit of a misnomer because it's actually a bit below what the rental market can typically bear. But it is the amount that a Section 8 housing choice voucher holder can pay. And so HUD voucher is only willing to pay a certain rental rate. And so we're asking for these property owners to restrict their rent amounts to that rate for 5 years.
Sean
Tom has a question.
So I hear you use the term underutilized properties. Is that equatable, or would you dissect from that grouping atrophied properties that are uninhabitable, or any characterization of how many of these properties the roofs are leaking and they're just not even livable, and that we're bringing back to life so that they're functioning roofs?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would definitely that's really our target, is those units that, but for a little bit of reinvestment, they're sitting vacant because of a leaky roof, various other code violations issues.
Vacant, non-code compliant, non-weatherized.
Right. Yeah. Oftentimes it's an electrical issue. You need an electrical upgrade. I'm sure Paul can speak to some of the specific instances, and of course we're happy to come back. We've identified some folks in the 4 other homeownership centers outside of Wyndham Windsor, where Paul works, that would be happy to come in and talk about stories. But some of the just sort of examples of anecdotes, you might have a property owner who goes to upgrade a unit, they replace a couple outlets and realize they're all still knob and tube wiring, and all of a sudden that $5,000 rehabilitation is now a $25,000 project, and they're stuck. And so this funding is really meant to try to address some of those issues, unexpected issues that come up during a rehabilitation or things like that. So that was the original program.
So now we are.
Well, then we went to, when the ARPA funding came around, we expanded the program a little bit. We ratcheted up. We've constantly been trying to increase the requirements on property owners to find the sweet spot where we're getting really the best bang for our buck and the best utilization of state dollars in terms of revitalizing units and getting folks housed as quickly as possible, particularly people who are experiencing homelessness. The ARPA funds required a direct nexus to the COVID pandemic. And so what we did at the time was we originally only required that a property owner review a certain number of referrals from the homeless service providers. Over a period of time, we increased that requirement to actually require property owners accept a referral from a coordinated entry or continuum of care organization, which is the clunky HUD terms for our homeless service providers. And so for a while, we were running the program where every single unit was being utilized by, when it was completed, was being utilized by a person exiting homelessness. We tinkered with the grant amounts and increased the maximum amount to up to $50,000. But but then put in requirements about bedroom size. So and that worked for quite a while, continued to work for a while, and now we're actually entering what we're calling VHIP 2.0, which, as the program currently stands, it is grants or forgivable loans, and I'll explain why that's important. Up to $50,000 for brand new units. So if you say had a commercial structure that you converted to residential, each of those units that resulted would be eligible for up to $50,000. It's up to $50,000 for a rehabilitated unit that's 3 bedrooms or more. We wanted to be sure that we were addressing some of the needs of our families. For units that are rehabilitated, that pre-existing units that were rehabilitated and are less than 3 bedrooms, so studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, are eligible for up to $30,000. So typically the grants are between $30,000 and $50,000. It requires at least a 20% match. So the property owner needs to put in the first 20%, at least the value of 20% of that grant needs to be first money in from the property owner. We do allow for stacking of funds. So if the property owner had weatherization funds, for instance, or some other program, that could be considered match. We've found that most of these programs are greatly exceeding that 20%. In fact, I think it's fair to say that a plurality actually do a full 100% or more match on that grant in terms of their own personal funds going into these projects. So again, $30,000 to $50,000, 20% match, and in exchange, we require the property owners to choose one of 2 paths, essentially. The first path is a 5-year commitment to affordability at that HUD fair market rate, and that unit needs for that 5 years to be utilized by somebody exiting homelessness or a family or a household that is working with a refugee resettlement organization. So that's one option. Option 1 is the 5-year, as we call it. So a 5-year affordability and a homeless service requirement. The option 2 is 10 years of affordability without the homeless service requirement. So they need to rent at HUD fair market rent for a full 10 years. And rent to somebody, anybody who can afford that rent is able to utilize those units.
Okay, Randy has a question for you.
The issue of exiting homelessness being one of the requirements of the plan that you just mentioned, isn't there any provision for someone who is imminently going to be homeless, can be certified by some agency or other for that condition, but has not actually become homeless?
Yes, we have allowed that. The way we actually structure it is that the referral needs to come from a homeless service provider agency. And so they've been instructed that we don't necessarily need to take the strict HUD definition of homelessness, but if they know that somebody is about to come on their rolls, then they can make that referral to a VHIP unit as well, and that's considered eligible. We're trying to be as broad as possible.
What does that mean in terms of timing?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What does that mean in terms of timing? For example, I've seen a couple of constituents who have situations, the husband's about to die, the number of income elements are going to go away. The wife who's living in property that she can no longer afford once that person dies knows about it 6 weeks in advance. With that kind of circumstance, and I've got 2 of those, qualify?
It could, yes.
But David has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. So earlier, maybe 10 minutes ago or so, you mentioned that you had some hesitations about the HUD fair market value in relation to the current market costs or obligations. You kind of hemmed and hawed around that a little bit. I wonder if you could just touch that again on if you think the HUD fair market value is still an appropriate test for eligibility for the VHIP program.
Sure. So the HUD, I could do a whole 40 minutes just on how HUD calculates their fair market rents. It's unfortunately not quite so easy, but the easiest way for me to describe it, and Jamie actually has a lot of expertise in this as well. So if you imagine the spectrum in a given area, and for Vermont, HUD, generally speaking, with the exception of the Burlington area, considers our counties to each be their own region, sort of rental market. So for instance, let's take Rutland County. So HUD theoretically does a rental survey of Rutland County. They look at the spectrum of the least expensive to the most expensive rentals. Then they cut it down to what is 60%. I'm looking at Jamie, it's 60%, correct? Yeah, 60% of the cheapest. And the most expensive in that 60% is where the limit for the voucher is placed. So just going into it, there's already there's only 60% of the availability there. And we know just historically that the HUD numbers do not tend to adhere. They don't move as quickly as our rental market does.
Right.
Historically, the State Housing Authority has almost regularly had to do their own surveys and appeal HUD's determination of what is at the highest allowable rent. I believe right now the Vermont State Housing Authority has the authority in a couple counties. I'd have to double check on this to go up to 110% of what that HUD voucher is. So that said, in terms of this program, it's a little bit like the clock is 10 minutes fast. You just kind of accept that it's the best measure we have on an annual basis. We don't have the funds to do rental surveys regularly. It's very labor intensive. So utilizing those federal guidelines is sort of our most consistent, best mechanism, I would opine.
Thank you, Sean.
Of course.
Keep going.
Certainly, and so there's the two options: the 5-year option or the 10-year option. The 10-year option is currently structured as a zero interest forgivable loan, and so basically every year that a unit is in service, 10% of that the loan that was provided for these units is forgiven. This was actually a structure that we requested a while back for tax purposes. We were finding out that many people who were opting for 10 years, or actually even during the 5 years, were being hit with a pretty big tax bill because that entire grant was taxable in the year that they received it. Unfortunately, it took us a little while to figure out all of the tax implications, the mechanics, whether or not it was eligible. That type of platform was under the purview of mortgage lending requirements and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of legal things that went into even getting us the structure so that we could actually call it a forgivable loan. So the way it's structured now, the taxable amount is only that 10% that's forgiven in that given tax year. So that makes it a much more affordable and much less risky for a particularly moderate income people, because we have found that moderate income property owners have taken advantage of this program that wouldn't have been able to do the rehabilitation on their own. I think there's another question.
Before Tom asks this question, the grant tax implication is a straight grant. I mean, they're still taxed on that.
Correct.
Right. Okay, Thomas.
Are there circumstances when you don't forgive this, or is there strings attached that is a motivation for you to keep that condition?
Correct. And so if the unit comes out of compliance, we basically reserve two options. We can either pause that 10-year period. So if we find that a unit we ask for an annual recertification of every unit. So every year we are set up to receive basically a form. It's a self-attestation because there's so many units and so few people, so many units that we're dealing with, and we select at random a few to do a deeper dive on just as a quality check. But every year we receive a form that acknowledges that the property is still in compliance. If it is not in compliance, we can either pause that compliance period. So say somebody raises the rent too high, we say that you can have that throughout the, typically we'd ask them to come back into compliance. If they refuse, we'll either pause the compliance period and there's actually a lien that's put on the property with the title. So we do have legal documents that have strings attached to these properties. So we can
are you commonly unforgiving?
We have yet to have any serious issues. Most folks have played nicely. You know, it is a voluntary program, so theoretically, the folks who are willing to engage are, you know, willing to commit. So we can either pause
Go into it, eyes wide open.
yeah, or we can require a payback. So let's say somebody does 3 years of their 10 years and they either fall out of compliance or decide they no longer can afford to do it, or they're selling the property, they need to get out for any other reason, they can pay back the remainder. So in this instance, let's say they were 3 years in and all good, and then you know they want to pull out of the program, they can pay back 70% of what the program originally provided. So we got the 30% value that we purchased. We get back the 70% and we'll roll that back into the program to go to new units.
Great. Why don't you keep going?
Okay. I think at this point, given the time, I'm gonna if it works for the committee, I'm gonna hand it over to my colleague Jamie, who can talk a little bit about some of the successes that we've had and some of the progress that we made. And before I do throw the talking stick her way, I do want to point out that this has not been a linear program by any stretch. It's been oscillating because we have yet to have any base funding. And every time the program gets tweaked, it goes through a pretty big overhaul of all of our, we have a lot of informational material that goes along with this, exactly to Senator Clarkson's point, so that people go in eyes wide open. So every little manipulation of the program requires many hours of updating of all of those guidance documents, and sometimes even some investigation on our own, hence, you know, tax implications and the like. So,
so Sean, who's going to walk through the ask? Because you're asking to make what was once a pilot a permanent program, which has implications. You're asking to move it from one-time funding to base funding.
Yeah.
And that we have in the administration's proposal, which will have language as we'll look at that on Friday. So
if Jamie can speak to the statistics,
who's going to flesh that out?
I'm happy to flesh that out after Jamie gives you
okay, yeah. Great. And then I want to leave time for Paul to.
Yes, yes.
Great, because we have some issues with ADUs. Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you for welcoming me this morning. I'm Jamie Bauer. I am with the Housing Division and one of the two people who help manage the VHIP program. It's me along with my colleague, Erin Guayo. If you would allow me to share my screen, I could share some data.
Is that what we have in front of us?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Oh, hold on one second. Why is that not showing? I don't know why. Oh, here we go. There we are. Okay, can everybody see?
If you just make it full screen, we'll be in good shape.
Perfect. Oh, let me actually make this one smaller. And
if you use that, there you go.
There we are. So to date, we have over 1,000 units completed or funded. As Sean alluded to, it is a really affordable program for taxpayers with a $39,000 average award per unit and a $32,000 average match. So it's almost always 100% match on this program. And with either most of these are 5-year affordability. The VHIP 2 are just now coming online. I do want to address a question maybe some of you have, is that whether how people are selecting the 5-year versus the 10-year. To date, people are still selecting the 5-year. We're at 66% of landlords are doing the 10-year, but 33.58 are doing the 5-year. So we are very pleased about that. And for VHIP 2.0 is an average of 44,000 per unit. Also, as Sean alluded, this is a rehab program. Even with the new provisions, we are largely rehab. We have had 130 ADUs completed to date, and a lot of those are in Chittenden County, where the market forces make ADUs more attractive than rehabbing apartments.
Jamie, before you leave this, what's the grand list increase of because I think one of the key things you need to be sharing with us is the the increase in the grand list value as a result of this program.
That is a great question, and we have not done that analysis yet. So I'm happy to come back with that number.
Okay, great. I think we'd appreciate it. That's just the one thing we're missing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And another thing I wanted to quickly address, the 2025 is the first year that we will be having the units age out of compliance. So what will happen with the landlords afterwards is to be determined, but we will be reaching out and seeing if they're going to continue to keep the units affordable. We hope so. The landlords that we work with are very proud of the program.
Is there an incentive you've been thinking about, or a carrot that we can offer tax wise or in some other capacity that would incent them to continue keeping it affordable? Because I know we're hitting our first class of VHIP owners, and so we're going to see what they choose to do.
Sean, you can speak to this. My understanding is we're going to kind of see what happened and then figure out what we need to or not need to do. Does that sound right, Sean?
Indeed, yeah. In most of these cases, we've heard that the rents that they're receiving for the sort of quality and amenities of the units that we're talking about we expect that they'll likely, if they're not right at HUD FMR, they're going to be relatively close. But we'll see. We have, to answer your question directly, we've not really considered incentives about continuing the units being involved in any particular program. Our goal really was getting more availability in the market.
Right. And so it'll be and you're tracking this closely to see who goes straight up to fair market value and who stays relatively affordable.
Yeah, we just don't know.
Yeah, but you have the ability, to go to Randy's point always, you have the ability to measure and stay in touch with people and track this.
Yes.
Right.
And just also wanted to highlight that it is only 2 of us that are working actively on this program, and it is very touch intensive. We work directly with the homeownership centers, the CEs, and even landlords. And talking about the waivers, only 38 units have had the CE waiver approved, and any application, Aaron or I are on the phone with those landlords, working extensively with them to help keep them from having to get a waiver. So we work hard on this and to make sure that we are benefiting our most vulnerable Vermonters. As Sean alluded, we are hoping for more base funding and stability for not only our staff, but for the homeownership staff and the CE staff. It's hard for them to ramp up for VHIP if they don't know that VHIP is going to be around. So I think that will help all of us. And we are learning as we go. We're getting more stringent with prioritizing approvals, looking at what the CE needs are, the tenants' needs for services, transportation, geography, and the like. So we are honing the program as we go along. If you don't have other questions, I can stop sharing my screen. Let me know.
Oh, don't you have some more? You have a couple more pages here.
All right, we can go through them then. We have touched every county in the state with units. So we are a truly statewide program. And here's kind of a breakdown of projects. We have that broken down by the VHIP 1, the rapid rehousing program, and VHIP 2.0, just so you can see that. And this is looking at, this last page is looking at the end of compliance period. So again, 2025 is the first year for that, and we'll see how it goes.
Right. So we have 525 units at stake here for the first report that could become.
So for
The
2020,
first, it's VHIP 1.0.
yeah.
So
For
I mean, you have 525 potential families, people having to move if their rents are increased dramatically.
And that's actually staggered over the next couple of years. So I think this year it's this bottom bar graph, correct, Jamie?
Yeah, it's not
so
very
it's
many
only
this year.
66 units will be
Oh,
under
okay.
surveillance for coming out of compliance this year, not under surveillance, but we'll be tracking for leaving compliance. But you can see 2026, next year we're going to see a larger number. And so this actually sort of shows the oscillation I was referring to as the program has sort of ramped up and down depending on funding.
So we have 66 this year. Are you proactively reaching out to them, or are you just letting them?
We're just beginning that. So the compliance period for those won't end until the end of this year. So we're just beginning to do that outreach to those property owners to get a sense of what their plans are.
If we explored an incentive to either keep it affordable, I mean, the options are keeping it relatively affordable or going straight up to market value, right?
Yes.
Right. Thanks. Okay, are we pivoting back to the ask?
Yes, I will go real quick. I know we're cutting into Paul's time a little bit. So VHIP actually exists in statute right now. It is not the big changes, the relatively small changes actually that we're asking for this year are there are a few, and I'll rapidly go through them. So first off, we'd like to clarify that there is actually a 10-year option without a homeless requirement. At the very end of the last session, that homeless requirement seemed to be added to the 10-year option, and we were not spoken about with that. We did reach out to then Chair Ram Hinsdale and Chair Stevens to be sure that their committees were in agreement that that 10-year option should still be available. So we have been running with the 10-year option. So we'd like to make that clarification. There was also a desire to add an accessibility incentive, an additional $20,000 for accessibility elements. It took us a while to figure out, there's a lot of different accessibility things, thanks to Jamie and Aaron for doing an awful lot of work with the Division of Fire Safety and Department of Aging and Independent Living and various other stakeholders to get a real clear idea of what should qualify for that. So there's some language in the proposal now to make that clarity. We're asking for base funding for the program. The governor's ask is for $4 million. That will allow us to make sure that VHIP continues. And as Jamie says, we can avoid the difficulties with increasing and decreasing staff to right size based on the program. So having that base funding creates that stability. And also we have wait lists of tens of millions of dollars worth of projects that are eager to get started. So having even some base funding just so that we know that the program can continue and we don't have to keep doing a stutter step will be really helpful. As part of that base.
At our height, Sean, at our best year, I think it was 6 million, wasn't it?
20
What?
20 million at the
Oh,
height.
the first
But
year.
in terms of an annual, it was 20 initially, but
That was the
You
that
have
was the
20 million?
biggest-
yeah, right.
20 million was the largest annual
Yeah,
amount.
That's what we had more money to play with, right?
Yeah.
More money.
And as part of that base funding, we'd also like to ensure that the department is able to utilize up to 5%, no more than 5% of any allocation towards our own staffing needs, because to date, we have actually been using other federal funds to provide the salaries and benefits for Jamie and Aaron as this program. And naturally, I cannot run it on my own when so we're looking for that. So those are the changes that we're seeking, is mostly clarifications and the base funding.
And Keisha has a question, and I want to go back to permanency.
Sean, I think Senator Brock asked this a while ago, but you all seem like lovely people. We have funded a lot of housing navigation positions, and hopefully other ones are sunsetting, and we can streamline where people go for state and some other resources for housing navigation. And if that's you two, great. But then I think we need to be advertising that and intentionally ending other housing navigation staffing that might just make things more confusing.
Sure. I thought that's what the home ownership centers were doing, was the housing navigation.
And they've asked to end it, I thought.
I didn't think so, because without those partners there, Paul is navigating and enabling at the same time. So if you were to hear,
we absolutely cannot run this program without continued partnership with the home ownership centers. Right now, the
create a flow chart of some kind, because right now it's just really unclear what we're funding and who it's funneling people toward.
Yes, we have a workflow that we can share, and I'm happy, Jamie, we can probably write up a little narrative about how we utilize the funds for various admins. So yes, we will.
Like a visual, like an infographic. Because if someone comes to us for money for housing navigation that is not in the infographic, I don't think we can continue it. So,
right,
the power's in your hand.
Yeah, and I think we're going to hear from Paul about how an individual home ownership center does that. So
yes, happy to provide the infographic about the flow of the program and any other information about how we keep staffing it.
Thank you. That would be great. And it's, from what I understand, it's a staff of 3 of you and Jamie and Eric, or Aaron.
So right now the housing division is there's 3 permanent staff, myself, Naomi Cunningham, and Scott Sharland are our 3 permanent positions. Jamie, Aaron Aguayo, and we actually have another individual who's working on our manufactured home program, Corey Potter. They're all limited service positions. So we are a very small team.
So yeah, in that flow chart, if you could list who's limited service and who's.
Is Scott also a limited service? He's not replacing a limited service person.
Since Scott replaced Arthur, that he moved from a limited service to a full-time position.
Okay.
So, yes.
Okay, great. Anything else before we pivot to Paul to go to answer?
I would happily pivot to Paul.
Okay, so just the primary reason to move to permanent, because I think there's questions about this, it's anyway. What is your primary reason? It's stability, certainty, expectation?
All of the above, yes.
Yeah. Okay, right. Thank you, Jamie and Paul. Jamie, lovely to meet you. Paul, Sean, always good to see you.
And hopefully we'll see you in 3 dimensions sometime soon.
And we're all very proud of this program, and so we're delighted it's growing in the way it is. And we're going to pivot to Paul. Paul, you heard our introductions. If you'd be kind enough to introduce yourself and tell us what you do and how you help us build ADUs and how we can, because ADUs are an important part of this project. We don't see, unless I'm missing it, a breakout of ADUs within this, which I would appreciate. I don't think I saw a breakout of ADUs in here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would appreciate that, because some of us love ADUs, and I mean, I think we all do.
What would that tell you?
It would tell you who's using their home and building an ADU in it.
About to build one. Since
Right.
my daughter's
Exactly.
college.
Exactly. So, Paul, it's yours.
Okay, hi, I'm Paul Moderano. I'm with I'm the rental rehab improvement program coordinator at Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. VHIP is the main a main function for me these days. It's very busy. I didn't go back to rehousing data. Jamie supplied that. I believe we had, we've been operating these programs in these counties for the 5 years. I started at the beginning of the CARES Act funding back in 2020. And I can see that, and just to quickly speak to the people that are graduating this year, so to speak, I can say that there's a couple of people I know down in Windham County, at three particular property owners that we that represent over I think it's 22, 23 units, generally have historically worked with the continuum of care organizations like Pathways, Groundworks down in that area. And so I think that some of these properties that have been rehabbed will continue at a, fair market. When I first started, the fair market rate was a raise to a couple of these people. And but that is no longer the case. I think for one thing on the top of my head, an efficiency unit was $671 with the gross HUD fair market rate in 2020. And it's currently $1,012 or something like that, I believe. And the gross is the heat, hot water, some utilities that are included in that. But currently, speaking of ADUs, in the first round of VHIP, ADUs was sort of a new idea. And so we had out of 136 requested units, let me see, 20 of those were ADUs. So that's about 15% of the total funding that we had that went to specifically ADUs in the original VHIP. So let's.
136 VHIP unit requests.
Yep, requested for our 2 counties. That was just our 2 counties.
For Windsor Wyndham Housing Trust. And
Yep.
how many were ADUs? 12?
No, 20.
20.
And so there's 10 completed. 8 of them are currently in construction. And 2 of them came about due to they were on hold and some of the funding that some projects didn't come through. And so 2 of them one is approved and one of them is in review currently, which means they're waiting for at this particular case, they're waiting for a wastewater permit. And wastewater is a big factor in ADUs, which I can speak to in a minute. But the VHIP 2 program, we have currently 81 units requested, and 9 of them are specifically ADUs. So it's about 10 or 11%. And then and of those, 7 are in review right now, and the 2 others are also. So most of the ADUs take a bit of work to get off the ground, because a lot of them have if you have your septic tank, you have a two bedroom. If you have a 2-bedroom house, generally you could have a smaller septic tank, like a 700, they used to have 750 gallon ones that they would install to 1,000 gallons. And so expanding to an ADU, generally they're efficiency or 1 bedroom, but expanding and adding that ADU will take an engineer to go out there, have a look. Sometimes you can go directly to the Agency of Natural Resources and get the okay. Depends on the listing page. And so this is some of the stuff that I do. I'll go through the listing, how many, what's your house listed at, and go through this whole process. And but one of the big slowdowns in many of the projects that didn't go through, this represents all the ones that did so far, but the didn't go through happened to either had the septic system needed to be completely upgraded during the in-review process. And that it became cost prohibitive. Some people didn't want to go forward because it costs a couple $1,000s to have an engineer come to your property and have a look and then do some perk testing and things like that. So that could be about $3,000 in cost pre-construction to finally find out if your septic is adequate. So with ADUs, the septic tanks become a major player because a lot of times these ADUs are going in rural areas or small towns that development isn't really a possibility. For instance, two of these ADUs from the VIA program, three of them actually up in Woodstock, which is a town. There's not really a good place to plop a development in there. And, so they're kind of on the outskirts. One of them is still being completed right now, but two of them were completed. And as for the rental portion of ADUs, the fair market rate is the main function. There was like an 80% area median income guideline in there as well at one point. And that sort of keeps the pool down a bit, just as an idea of what that means in area median income. So say Windham County, I believe the area median income for a single person, 80% is about 52,000. So that number sounds like, 80% area median income, but it's not really a good average, even if you ask me, so there's of what actual people are earning in these two counties. But most of the ADUs that we have, I know that some went to three, I know went directly to local workers in the school system, restaurant workers, and a lot of times I'll refer people over to Senior Solutions. One unit went over to Senior Solutions, and most of them went to low income people. And that's what I found. A lot of the motivation is either people want to try to help the situation we have in Vermont. And some people, they have, another function that ADUs do fill. And I think, personally, I think this is a good thing. We have aging parents sometimes filling these ADUs. Sometimes people are aging themselves, moving from salaried employment to Social Security, retirement, things like that. And so the ADU can help supplement their income. So even if you can do the program, if you could do the projects at the grant, maybe plus the 20% match, then that works for most people. If you can do certain types of ADUs, if they don't have any septic upgrades, if they're on town water, for instance, and then they're building like an infill type of ADU, which is part of the house. You can even work those nicely with septic tanks because you can snag a bedroom and create the ADU, and then your septic usage doesn't change. Because in Vermont, the bedrooms is a big part of the formula for the Agency of Natural Resources. And so I can pause briefly if people have a question on any of that yet, or.
So I've heard these have been great for actually much needed sort of workforce housing. I mean, I know Kesha has a teacher in hers who otherwise couldn't afford housing in Woodstock, so that's great. And so what I've heard locally is that these are workforce people using this housing and not necessarily.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's what I do try to get. Because they want the ADUs with the other units with grants. They do have the coordinated entry or the lead agency people working with them. And so most of the time with the ADUs, it's usually me trying to work with the people to fill the units. And a lot of times people, that's what they're looking for, really. There's some of them are building the unit specifically. I believe in Tesha's case, she literally built that unit specifically for a local, I think it was a teacher's aide or a new teacher in the area.
Yeah, new teacher.
Yeah.
So I guess one of our questions would be, you also function as sort of a housing navigator. I mean, people really come to you and test the waters and see if it's viable, and then you work with them all the way through the project, right?
Yes, they do. Actually, as a matter of fact, yesterday I sent out a group email to about 150 individuals who are on our wait list or contact list, because what we rolled it out last year. The VHIP, when it rolled out, there was when we converted over part of the funding to loan, there was a little bit of a delay in between the opening of the program and loan documentation that we could have. And I personally had to take a leave of leave for medical leave, but and so we did it a little bit differently this time. Last spring, we opened the applications for a period, and those are the 81 units that I mentioned are those 81 applicants that kind of made it. They didn't get declined due to various things. We have some criteria which we use, like the communities they're in, things like that. And with ADUs, personally, I try to get people in more, like I said, smaller towns, but also rural areas. This time I had someone, I don't know if anybody's ever been to Halifax, but you know, there's a few places that,
Very
you know,
small Wyndham County town.
it really is, and it's down, you know, but what I'll try to do in these cases, I'll look and I'll add, the first question I have if I go down to 14 miles of dirt road is, who's going to rent this place from you in the end of all this, you know? And so a lot of times people, like in that particular case, her mother is retiring and she doesn't have anywhere to live. She's currently living in a camper. And so she's building this ADU for her to move in to this property, you know? And so, you know, I'm looking, you know, in these types of places like Halifax is really way out there, and so, you know, so it's sort of a part of the condition of choosing approval, you know, and so that goes into the process.
So sadly, our time is almost done up. Do you have housing navigators independent of yourself? Or are you sort of considered the housing navigator?
Well, we recently did hire I have a new person now helping out in Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust. But and so she's actually going to be helping with that. But I generally have been relying on a position, landlord liaison positions for the grants and people that have to go through that. But otherwise, it was just me historically speaking.
Right. And so, Sean, do we have, I mean, when Keisha talks about housing navigators, where are they embedded or who's overseeing them?
So I think the term housing navigator means, as with so many terms in our housing ecosystem, means different things to different people. I think much of the housing navigator work is done by folks like Paul at the homeownership centers. And there's also housing navigation at many of the community action agencies for people for prospective tenants who are seeking homes and need help finding that or navigating that process. Our navigation is probably a little bit more on the property owner side and trying to get them through it, right. But also making connections with the coordinated entry folks, the continuum of care, and the other homeless service providers.
Great, terrific. Thank you very much. Thank you both, Paul and Sean. I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm going to send you an ADU tax proposal idea for post completion, because I understand one of our big challenges is ADU owners finishing their ADUs and all of a sudden reappraise and have a huge tax liability that they hadn't anticipated. So maybe sort of bending the curve on that and creating a slope into that higher tax bracket would maybe help us a bit attract more ADU.
That would be wonderful and great to see. And if I may, just one other, I neglected to mention, there's one other change that we were actually asking for, and that is to codify the fact that these are not mortgage loans and so are not subject to Vermont's mortgage lending requirements.
The any VHIP grant or loan is not
a mortgage, and therefore doesn't. When one issues a mortgage, the mortgage issuer has a certain set of liabilities, and we want to be sure that those homeownership centers are held harmless.
Is that language in the language we have?
Yes.
Okay, great. Terrific. Thank you both very much.